Hey, I'm Tracie Goodman, and I'm the Agriculture and Natural Resource and 4-H agent for McCreary County Extension. And today I wanted to explain in a little bit more detail what soil testing actually is and why it's such an important service that we offer at the McCreary Extension office. So first, I wanted to ask, what is good soil? Um, Good soil, the perfect soil, retains water but still drains really well. It stays crumbly and workable without becoming really crusty and hard. And it has enough minerals for optimum growth with a pH between 6.2 and 6.8. So this is the dream scenario of what your soil should be. Now, it would be nice to have this type of soil right out the gate, but we all know that that really isn't the case most of the time. So, we're going to talk about what you can do to fix your soil if it's not exactly like this right off the bat. So, how do I get good soil? Like I said, few sites are going to match that ideal in all respects. But the good news is that your soils can be modified. It is a pretty long-term process. Sometimes it takes several years to get your soil to that good state that you want it to be in. But also another piece of good news is that there are a lot of crops that will tolerate fairly poor soil and still grow pretty well. So if you're looking to grow a vegetable garden, vegetables do pretty well in just about any type of soil. They do better in, the best soil that you can give them, but they do okay in poor soils too. So you can still grow your vegetable crops while you're also trying to amend your soils. And also for, say, forage crops and turf grasses, tall fescue is a very popular variety of turf grass and forage grass, and it is known to do really well in fairly poor soils. So while it's not a quick process to get your soil exactly where you need it to be, you could still grow things in the meantime and it'll be fine. Now, one of the most important things to do is get your soil test done. And we're going to talk about what that is, how you collect your samples, all that in just a little bit. But the timing of your soil testing is actually right now. You really want to get it done in the fall. That's the best time to do it because it gives you ample time to amend your soil prior to that growing season in the spring. You can get soil testing done in early spring as well, but it doesn't give you a ton of time to work on amending your soil prior to planting. Now, a soil test measures your soil acidity, which is the pH, your available phosphorus, potassium, zinc, magnesium, and calcium that are already present within your soil. So this measures exactly what your soil contains before you apply anything to it. And based on these results, I will actually make recommendations for fertilizer and lime application if needed. So again, why do you need a soil test? Soil testing actually should be the first step before you even decide what to plant, because your different types of, so say you were trying to grow a certain type of forage grass. Different species of forage grasses need different things. And it's the same with, say, landscape plants or trees or turf grass, vegetables, fruits. All of those things kind of need different nutrients in different amounts. So anything that you are wanting to plant, you want to add your amendments based on those requirements of whatever you're planting, just to get the best result possible. So on your property, you may have different soil types in different fields or often areas within the same field that vary in the availability of plant nutrients. And all of this depends on what's already existing on the property, maybe what you've grown in the past, if there are trees on the property as well or other plants. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration before you collect your samples in these areas. And getting a soil test is going to help you determine exactly what additions that your soil needs. So also one of the benefits to soil testing is that it saves you money in the long run. So rather than going out and buying like a huge load of a popular fertilizers, triple 19, rather than going out and buying a huge load of triple 19 and just dumping it all over your field or your garden or whatever, you may actually need less than what's in that. So you may need a different percentage of those nutrients. You may need less fertilizer than what you're actually been applying in the past. So it will actually save you money when you apply the exact amount that your soil needs. It also prevents environmental waste because you won't be dumping out an unnecessary amount of fertilizer that the soil can't uptake, thereby increasing runoff and leaching it into the groundwater. Now, to collect a soil sample in a field, you're going to want to take slightly more cores than you would, say, if it were a lawn or a little garden area. But the same tools apply to both. You need something like a spade or a shovel or a soil probe, which we actually have those at the extension office. If you want to come by and borrow one, you're certainly welcome to do that. The rule is for fields, you want to take at least 10 cores for a small area and up to 30 for a larger field. And you're going to want to take those cores randomly throughout that field so that you have a good representative sample of the entire field as a whole. And once you collect your cores, you're going to place them into a plastic bucket. I say plastic because if you use a metal bucket, those metals in the bucket may interact with your sample and throw it off a little bit. So put them in a clean plastic bucket and mix them together. And some of the areas that you may not want to sample are back furrows or dead furrows, old fence rows, areas that might have been used for manure or for hay storage and livestock feeding in the past, or areas where you have had lime piled in the past. And I will say also alongside gravel roads, you want to avoid those areas and just collect samples that are going to represent your field as a whole. Now, collecting a lawn or garden sample is slightly different. You're going to want to sample your gardens, lawns, any type of problem areas, and landscaped areas separately. And you're going to collect your cores randomly from each area, just like you would with a field. For trees, you're going to want to include the soil below the width of the tree. If you're trying to establish shrubs, flower beds, or gardens, you want to sample the soil where the plants are growing. So you want to avoid with lawns or gardens, compost areas under drip line of trees unless you are trying to grow a tree there, or close to driveways or streets. And then once you collect your sample using the same tools that you would use in a field sample, you will fill up either a soil sample bag, which we have those at the extension office. If you want to come by and grab one, you can have one. You can use a jar, you can use a plastic bag, just whatever you have. Then once your sample is in the bag, you take it to us and we will do the rest for you. And one of the things that I didn't mention in the last slide is how deep your sample core should be. So for lawn or garden, so I'll say for lawn, typically the depth of your soil should be 3 to 4 inches because you just want that top surface area where your soil nutrients actually are. Now, if you have an area that you till, like a garden or a field, you want to take your sample to the depth of that tillage because when you till, it turns the soil over and rotates your topsoil under. So you want to take a good, pretty deep core for tilled areas to get a good representative sample out of that. Now we'll talk about the essential plant nutrients, and this is basically what your soil test actually measures. So plants need 2 different types of nutrients. They need macronutrients and micronutrients. Macronutrients are required in relatively large quantities, and those are nitrogen, which is really important for vegetative growth, phosphorus, which is required for flowering and fruiting, potassium, which contributes to durability and disease resistance in your plant, and calcium, sulfur, and magnesium are also required in comparatively large quantities. And all of these things actually contribute to plant growth in some way or another. Now, micronutrients are required in very small amounts, and these are things like copper, zinc, iron, and boron. Now, the importance of pH ties into your nutrient availability. So we're going to go back to school a little bit. If you haven't seen the pH scale in a while, your pH scale ranges from 0 to 14, 7 being neutral. So your pH below 7 means that it's more acidic. Your pH above 7 means that it's more alkaline. And pH is something that directly affects that soil nutrient availability and your ability of your plants to uptake those nutrients that are available in the soil. So pH is something that if it isn't right, even if you have the right amount of nutrients in your soil, if your pH isn't right, it's not going to be able to use those nutrients that are available to the fullest potential. So pH is something that varies depending on your desired plant. The majority of plants require about 6 to 6.5 pH. Most vegetables are around 6.2 to 6.8. Turf grasses vary depending on your type of turf grass, which I have a little chart here that shows kind of a range based on the type of lawn species. And for pastures, your pH is going to vary as well. So definitely pH varies depending on what you're trying to grow. Fortunately, when you get a soil test, it's going to tell you if you need to add lime or sulfur depending on those results, because when we tell them what you're trying to grow, they actually test for that and figure that out for you. So if your soil indicates that your pH is out of the range for what you're trying to grow, they will suggest either adding lime if your pH is low, which means it's too acidic, or you can add sulfur to lower your pH, because that would mean it's too alkaline. So definitely your soil test is going to tell you what you need to do to alter your pH so that your soil can uptake those additional nutrients that you add or maybe that you already have in the soil. Now this figure is kind of a representation of what it is that I'm talking about. So you'll see a pH of about 6 to 6.5 is generally where your plants are able to take up the most nutrients, and you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck usually within that range. But again, it does depend on what you're trying to grow there. Now, this might look a little bit Greek, but fortunately, you don't have to calculate this on your own. Sometimes you need to add fertilizer or organic matter, and your fertilizer bag is going to have a guaranteed analysis on it. So it always goes in number format, and it is always in this order. So you will have your percent nitrogen listed first, your percent phosphate listed second, and your percent potash listed last. So those numbers on the bag on the guaranteed analysis are in that order: percent nitrogen, percent phosphate, and percent potash. So for example, the label that I have in the figure is 3204. That is the type of fertilizer, and 3204 means it has 32% nitrogen in the bag, 0% phosphate, and 4% soluble potash. Now again, I will say that you only want to apply fertilizer as recommended based on your soil test results. Over application can be detrimental to growth, groundwater leaching, runoff. Under application is not going to give you enough of what you need. So fortunately, you don't have to do any math. I will get your soil test results back first, and based on those test results, I will translate that into a recommendation for exactly how much of a fertilizer that you need to apply. And I typically give a list of different fertilizers that may be available to you that you can choose from. Now, sometimes soils also benefit from the addition of organic matter, and these are things like peat moss, compost, or well-aged manure. And these all improve the drainage, water, and nutrient holding capacity of your soils. So say if you have soil that has a lot of clay in it, you can add this to kind of make your soil texture a little bit better and help it drain a little better. Or vice versa, if your soil is really sandy and loose, you can add organic matter to improve that texture to help it to hold moisture. So you really can't go wrong with the addition of organic matter. Now, these are my references that I use in this presentation. They are all UK College of Ag, Food, and Environment publications, and I will link them all in the video description. I used Liming Kentucky Lawns, Gardening in Kentucky, and Taking Soil Test Samples. And I will also have a video linked at the end where I actually did a demonstration of how to collect a soil sample and using different tools to do that. And this is my contact information. As always, if you have any questions about anything in this presentation or questions about soil testing, please give me a call at the McCreary Extension office and I will be happy to help. Thank you for watching.